I don't know much about 40k lore, so I went in open-minded. Vermintide 2 was my introduction to the universe, and it's a title praised by fans of the co-op run-based genre, a genre and series frequented by developer Fatshark. I still don't really know what anything is about, but as an outside observer that has yet to dabble, you could say I have an untainted experience, a newcomer's perspective on what it's like to enter the Warhammerverse. But I do have experience with the genre and am familiar with the mechanics behind it. I'm not interested in drawing comparisons between the two titles. I'll let the veterans do that. But I'm more interested in the entry's primary egregious sin, the grind. And regarding 40k, that means more than just one thing. So cue up. This is... spoiler free. Firstly, let's start off with some positives, because there's much to enjoy here. It will help us put the negatives into perspective, not just the specifics within Darktide, but of the features within the genre overall. The run-based co-op genre formula goes something like this.
On you go! That's the door open!
Select and complete missions, hopefully with varied objectives, earn resources, spend resources to strengthen character or acquire better gear, resulting in ability to tackle harder missions with more valuable and potential rewards. Rinse, repeat. For the most part, Darktide has this formula mastered, considering it's their third attempt at applying it. But alongside the formula, they bolster the individuality of the game by putting the effort into most of the other co-op focused features. There's classes with the different abilities that influence your playstyle, with level up capabilities that more or less determine your role. There are proximity buffs, so it's worth sticking together to maintain maximum efficiency. Death isn't necessarily a lose condition.
No, what the fuck?
So this means there's potential for rescue, and there's always a possibility for comeback. It also just feels good when your team decides not to leave you behind. The sound design is crunchy, and once you're acclimated, you can often decipher the happenings around you based purely on your hearing. The characters communicate with one another with the dialogue influenced by selected background and traits selected upon character creation, which is great, by the way. These small exchanges do wonders to build out the tone of the world and lets us get to know our characters, ironically, as we create them. Post-character creation and a bit of prep, we ease into the world as a fresh recruit in a world of torment. It's here we fall victim to the waves of hellfire and begin to understand the nature of the gameplay itself. It's a tone of oppression at scale, in which the background reinforces. It's a beauty to behold. The locations do a good job of reflecting the non-existent influence of our actions, and the disheartening destiny the locals inhabit. It's no wonder as to why they've become such monsters, as their lives grind away under miles of metal and seas of sweat. There's a sadness to the darkness. The same burdens they suffer, we suffer as well. To endure the grind over and over, seeking that glimmer of hope for the chance at something greater. The many doors that surround us lead nowhere but to danger. There is no security. Even so, we cannot tarry. Impatient teammates and unrelenting hordes are constantly badgering us for attention. The missions we all pursue may have different objectives, but the goal is the same. We could be reacquiring ammo amidst a train heist, searching for information, or assassinating a leader. It wouldn't be uncommon for us to ask what we're fighting for. The mission briefings are sparse. They leave much to be desired as there's not much in the way of story, meaning that if you want to know what's going on here or elsewhere in the 40k universe, this is not the place to start. Think of it as loosely connected related events that have no real impact on mission selection. Essentially, it boils down to, oh, you survived this long? Survive a little longer, until you reach max level. One wonders if it's the same retort given to the enslaved. So make no mistake, while we can take pride in our missions and defiance against the Horde, the grind is horrible. It can be alleviated with friends, but only in the social aspects, as they too suffer the grind. Side by side, but never together. There's no sharing, trading of resources or weapons, so if you roll a decent upgrade not suited for your current needs, there's nothing to be done. You can't share the wealth with other recruits. You can't share it with yourself. There's no crafting, meaning we can't repurpose scraps to work towards what we want. So if we are lucky enough to get something useful or a weapon that we want, what else is there to do? Sure, we can likely enjoy it for a few runs or use it to help the grind of our other weapons. I can't imagine people would grind for purely cosmetics, right? I don't want to just start over, I want to use this badass character to grind for items of my other characters. Or even if it's not items, let me earn money to ease the shop's prices. Do not misinterpret, grinding isn't necessarily bad. There's two purposes for it. From the business side, it's to keep players engaged in the game, while attempting to tease more money out of them from the cash shop. Sure, this is fine. Depending on the types of items offered, this could be acceptable. The second purpose is to offer players content and value with replayability. The replayability itself has value because of its circular nature. If players want to play, they'll spend more time in proximity to that oh so sweet cash shop. But if players drop off early because they identify the investment is not worthy, then Fatshark has failed its mission and has not offered enough. So how do we extend replayability? Only the fiercest of zealots will wait out the non-content. But it also isn't about offering soulless repeat content for nothing. There must be something to obtain, or otherwise steady reward system that makes it worthwhile. Else, the majority of players get burnt out. RNG rewards are fine, so long as the odds aren't too thin or the item's useless to our character when the RNG gods finally bless us. If I haven't made it clear, there's 3 primary ways to get loot. First, we have a chance for the Emperor to gift us a random item of random perks. Second, we have the shops that refresh every hour. And thirdly, we have the contract store, where we complete optional objectives for a special currency spent on these randomly generated items. None of these are tied to higher difficulties or anything you could do to influence what is randomly generated in any of these stores. Therefore, the incentive to run higher difficulties is diminished. Standard currency becomes a non-issue after a period of time, and there's no loot mid-mission. XP is capped once max level is reached, and when the Emperor rewards us, it's not based on our accomplishments in battle, but on more RNG. The gifts can be helpful alongside what's found in the shop, but these aren't rewards or solutions to the loot problem.
They're lies!
Once we realize we're better off blazing through simple, easier missions for the same rewards, we realize our future is trapped in the past. We're destined to continue doing what we've already done. If a player builds their character to max level and decides against a destiny of repetition, they'll again meet the cruel witch of fate. As a new character, they'll quite literally be repeating an identical grind, only this time, weaker and without purpose. The incentive is again absent. It's about pacing. The subsequent grinds are where Darktide suffers the most. These additional choices to grind shouldn't be non-existent, but they also shouldn't be as long as the first, for the sake of maintaining player engagement. Unfortunately, the cyclical nature of the current system sees us returning to the stores rather than to the battlefield. For Darktide to flourish as its predecessor, it needs a loot revamp. A more ideal system would allow some degree of shared benefits account-wide. We'll still have to level them and deal with item level restrictions until maxing out these new recruits. So to some degree, the grind still exists, but we could see the grind reduced and adjusted to feel rewarding, even if it's more of the same. There are few solutions to do this without upsetting the regular intended path of the grind. By sharing currency to acquire better gear from the shop more freely, using crafting resources to build or upgrade existing weapons or applying specific perks, or even just having a max level weapon waiting for them at the finish line as a reward the player gave to themselves, or perhaps even trade items to other players. And lastly, they can input incentives into the difficult missions with better RNG odds dropped mid-mission or after. For me, I'm roughly tolerant to grinds myself. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10's doing the same thing over and over for months, and 9's for weeks, I'm about an 8 if the gameplay's good. But the thought of the repeated grind for each character is disheartening, and frankly, I don't have much patience for it. All the features I mentioned earlier, the sound design, the missions, the locations, while all fantastic, are undermined by the unrewarding repetition. They alone can only refresh the grind so much. But a well-refined and paced reward system, or shared inventory banking system, are more surefire ways to retain higher player engagement for much longer. All the praise in the world won't keep us returning if the looming systems grind us into dust. It's sad to say that the oppressive atmosphere of the game has appropriately tonal systems of unrewarding player efforts as the universe of 40k itself. The atmosphere and the gameplay are bound, intentionally or ironically. Now the players are pushing back. They're not as unorganized as the hordes they face, but they are as angry and elite. Only time will tell if the powers that be will enact change. if Fatshark can withstand the onslaught of legitimate critique levied at them by the swarm of stalwart players. And finally, it will be up to them to show if they can reward their fans with their best work, or if the last of their accomplishments are behind them.